From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
September 11th changed the world. Our deepest fears now haunt us. Yet I am convinced that military action will not prevent further acts of international terrorism against the United States. As we act, let us not become the evil that we deplore.
That was Democratic Congressmember Barbara Lee, September 15, 2001, the sole member of Congress to vote against military action after the 9/11 attacks. Now she says she's hopeful the death of Osama bin Laden will lead to the end of the war in Afghanistan, where more than 100,000 U.S. troops and more than that in contractors are still deployed. Congressmember Lee will join us from Washington, D.C. Then rethinking Afghanistan.
Al-Qaeda is no longer in Afghanistan. They are not in Kandahar. They are not out in the desert. They are not in any part of Afghanistan. They've moved, but we are still fighting a war that the enemy's not even there. It's crazy.
We'll speak with filmmaker Robert Greenwald. He's launched a petition calling for an immediate withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. Then to Canada, which saw a significant political shift after its national election Monday. We'll speak with Stephen Lewis, former leader of the New Democratic Party. Saw a surge in the polls. His party helped establish single-payer health care in Canada. Then to Libya.
We were sitting safe in our homes, and we had no idea about the missiles until the children fell towards me, and I did not know where to take them. The door fell on us. Shrapnel fell on us. Why? Is this the protection of civilians for the West?
We get an update from Benghazi, and we'll speak with Alan Cooperman, the author of The Limits of Humanitarian Intervention. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Calls are mounting on Capitol Hill for the Obama administration to rethink its backing of Pakistan following the killing of Osama bin Laden. The Saudi-born leader of al-Qaeda was killed Sunday inside a heavily fortified compound located just 1,000 feet from Pakistan's premier military academy. Bin Laden may have lived there for 5 years. John Brennan is President Obama's deputy national security advisor.
I think it's inconceivable that bin Laden did not have a support system in the country that allowed him to remain there for an extended period of time. I am not going to speculate about what type of support he might have had on an official basis inside of Pakistan. We are closely talking to the Pakistanis right now, and again, we are leaving open opportunities to continue to pursue whatever leads might be out there.
Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein of California suggested the U.S. cut off military aid to Pakistan. She said, quote, "Our government is in fiscal distress. To make contributions to a country that isn't going to be fully supportive is a problem for many." Since 2001, Congress has approved about $20 billion for Pakistan in direct aid and military payments. U.S. officials say they deliberately withheld information about Sunday's raid on bin Laden's compound from the Pakistani government out of fears it would be compromised. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton praised Pakistan's cooperation over the years.
It's important to note that our counterterrorism cooperation over a number of years now with Pakistan has contributed greatly to our efforts to dismantle al-Qaeda. And in fact, cooperation with Pakistan helped lead us to bin Laden and the compound in which he was hiding. Going forward, we are absolutely committed to continuing that cooperation.
We'll have more on the death of Osama bin Laden after headlines. Turkey's prime minister has called for Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi to immediately step down. The call has been described as a major escalation of Turkish pressure on the Libyan leader. The Guardian newspaper reports scores of Syria's most prominent intellectuals and activists have gone into hiding as government forces continue to carry out raids and arrests across the country. 2 former guests of Democracy Now! Are now in hiding, Haitham Amala and Razan Zaytouneh. both prominent human rights attorneys. Human rights organizations estimate the Syrian authorities have detained more than 7,000 people since protests began in mid-March. About 600 people have been killed. Meanwhile, a journalist with Al Jazeera named Dorothy Parvaz has been missing since Friday. Parvaz is an American-Canadian Iranian citizen. She used to work at the Seattle Post-Intelligencer and was a Nieman Fellow at Harvard University. The AFL-CIO is urging the Obama administration to suspend a trade pact with Bahrain over the Gulf nation's attempt to crush pro-reform protesters. On Monday, authorities in Bahrain arrested 2 former parliament members of Bahrain's main Shiite opposition party. Bahraini authorities have also ordered the nation's main opposition newspaper to be shut down by next week and for 3 of its former top editors, to be tried. Bahrain is a close U.S. ally. It's the home of the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet. In the United Arab Emirates, authorities have shut down the elected board of directors of the Teachers Association. The move comes just as weeks after UAE had dissolved the board of the Jurist Association. On April 6, both organizations had co-signed a public appeal calling for greater democracy in the country, another close U.S. ally. Egypt's justice minister has said President Hosni Mubarak could face the death penalty if he's convicted of involvement in the death of over 800 pro-democracy demonstrators during the country's uprising earlier this year. Meanwhile, Egyptian activists say far more needs to be done to secure social justice for everyone in the country after the fall of the Mubarak regime. Khalid Ali is a labor lawyer in Cairo.
Egypt's coming reforms must include social reforms, not just political reforms. Freedom without social rights is worthless. What we see from Issam Sharaf's caretaker government is meaningless talk about social reforms, which are not embodied in any policies. They are doing quite the opposite. The first law they promulgated banned strikes, preventing workers from exercising this fundamental right. All these people are here today to affirm they have social demands that must be met, granting permanent positions to temporary workers, revoking the law that bans strikes, a minimum wage and a salary cap, and protecting health insurance.
13 Palestinian factions, including Fatah and Hamas, have signed a reconciliation deal that'll pave the way for elections within a year. The deal was signed following talks with Egyptian officials in Cairo. Meanwhile, Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad says the Palestinian Authority may not be able to pay for the salaries for about 130,000 public employees or anything else if Israel does not release about $100 million in funds collected over the last month on behalf of the Palestinian Authority. Israel's withholding the funds to punish Fatah for reaching a deal with Hamas. Fayyad said, quote, Israel has no right to withhold this money. This is Palestinian money, and it's not a grant or charity from Israel. In Canada, the Conservative Party, led by Prime Minister Stephen Harper, was elected to a majority in the Canadian Parliament in Monday's election, ending 5 years of minority government. Meanwhile, the left-leaning National Democratic Party won enough seats to become the official opposition party for the first time. The NDP nearly tripled its parliamentary seats. We'll have more on the Canadian elections later in the broadcast. In news from Japan, parents of young school children have staged an unusual protest to oppose the Japanese government's decision to allow children to be exposed to 20 times more radiation than was previously permissible. Furious parents responded to the rule change by delivering a bag of radioactive playground dirt to school officials. Before the nuclear crisis at the Fukushima plant, the acceptable radiation level for children was set at 1 millisievert per year. After the disaster, the government raised the acceptable limit to 20 per year. Officials said the move was needed because most of the schools near the plant were above the radiation original level. In other nuclear news, British police arrested 5 men near a nuclear reprocessing site in Cumbria Monday. The men are being held under the Terrorism Act. Police in South Korea have raided the offices of Google Korea and Daum Communications following allegations the companies collected information on the location of smartphone users for advertisement purposes without their permission. Google's also under investigation by South Korean authorities for allegedly collecting emails from unsecured wireless networks while photographing neighborhoods for its mapping service. The raid comes at a time when Apple and Google are facing scrutiny around the world for their practices for tracking the location of smartphone users. Sony has suffered another major information breach just 2 weeks after the personal account information of 77 million PlayStation Network users was compromised. The electronics giant has revealed that an additional 25 million game users had their personal information stolen days before the breach that was first reported. The head of PlayStation's video game unit estimates 10 million credit cards were involved in that incident. In Alabama, over 360 people are reported to still be missing after last week's devastating tornadoes. Police say it's difficult to know how many of those reported missing were killed by last week's siege of tornadoes. The official death toll from the storms is at least 350 people across the South. Meanwhile, a growing number of scientists say it's important to examine the link between global warming and extreme weather events like last week's tornadoes. A court in Honduras has dropped all remaining corruption charges against ousted President Manuel Zelaya, clearing the way for his return to the country after a June 2009 coup. The court dismissed charges of fraud and falsifying documents. Zelaya has said he will not return to Honduras until he's guaranteed immunity from legal action. In Vermont, protesters rallied in Burlington Sunday to show support for Vermont to become the first state to establish a single-payer health care system that guarantees coverage to all residents. Mary Cordes is president of the Vermont Federation of Nurses and Health Professionals.
We are here as healthcare professionals because we absolutely refute the corporate mandate that is stealing lives and stealing livelihood from the middle class and attacking the most vulnerable. So we stand in solidarity with everyone around the world who's fighting for workers' rights and for the vulnerable. When we talk about healthcare as a human right and we talk about equity and participation, we mean everybody. It can't be just white folks like me that get to have it. It means everybody.
In Portland, Maine, vandals defaced a mosque on Monday, just hours after the news broke that Osama bin Laden had been killed. The graffiti read Osama today, Islam tomorrow. The vandal misspelled the word tomorrow. And a correction from yesterday's headlines. The memorial service for famed civil rights attorney Leonard Weinglass is scheduled to take place Friday, May 13th at the Ethical Culture Society here in New York. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.